All right, guys, some great networking happening. Hard to get this part of the meeting when you're not here.
Okay.
All you just have to make sure is that it's like pointed toward me rather than the floor. Thank you, sir. All right, guys, we're gonna get started. This is so for those of you who don't really know, a little bit of my story is I started off flipping, and then I added in wholesaling. So that's getting properties under contract and selling that interest in that contract. And there were a few deals that I know right now, it's 566 Jessica Way in Covington, which is, if I ever need a good chap underneath my ass, I would go look at what it's worth now, because I had it under contract at such a good price, but I could only get short-term money on it. So I could either flip it or wholesale it, but it really should be in my portfolio. Anyone ever had one of those? And it's like, man, if I just had the access to it. I had it under contract at $92,500. Someone pull up Zillow for me, 566, if you don't mind, TJ, 566 Jessica Way in Covington. And tell me, I know estimates are not, don't at me, don't. But there's some level, and if you want to tell me what it comes up at. That was one of, there was two other properties that were the beginning changing factors for me. 257. It needed 30 in work. So, with that being said, let's pull one out for my portfolio. But again, I say that this is a good one to chart my bottom, because it's a reminder that access to capital can say whether you are forced to flip it, wholesale it, or you miss the opportunity altogether. So tonight we're going to talk about one of the skill sets that after those deals happened and I missed, okay, I still wholesaled them and made money, but I missed that long-term opportunity. Or, maybe I didn't get the short-term capital to flip it. In that period of time, I was using a home equity line of credit. And I only had so much, and it was tied up in another property. So my access to capital was limited. It was limited and was short-term. So, by missing those opportunities, what felt like missed opportunities for good properties that should be in my portfolio right now, it forced me to go learn a new skill set. Because right then, I was missing the skill set of knowing how to get access to either, whether it's short-term or long-term money. The banks wouldn't touch me because I left my job, my last W-2 job, so I was working full-time as a real estate entrepreneur. And so ultimately, one of the things I ended up learning 2 new skill sets during that period of time. I learned how to buy properties with creative financing. So that's using the seller or their existing financing to buy properties. A lot of you guys have heard me talk on that topic. But the other thing I learned is how to find private money from everyday individuals. And when I learned how to do that, it really opened up how I could tackle the opportunities that were in front of me. So tonight we're going to talk about that second one. How do you find, so for years, I've had, if you guys go on that Courtney10k.com, the top right link is the YouTube channel. We've had 2 other people talk on private money. If you guys know Steve Train with the Real Estate Disruptors and something, Pardon the Disruption or whatever podcast, I had him come and talk on it one time, and then I had Quest Trust, we'll talk about them in a little bit, came and talked about private money. But both of them were kind of left us a little lacking. A lot of people say, yeah, I watched those, that didn't help me find it or structure it. So I said, okay, I got you. Because for years people have said, oh, Courtney, how are you finding this? How are you structuring those deals? So that's, like I said, people have been asking for a while. I want to come and look. We got some notes. So let's start off. First of all, this is not legal advice. I'm not an attorney, nor do I play one. I'm not a CPA, nor do I play one. We have one in the room. I'm also not a securities advisor. So we're going to talk about that, looks like, here in a second. So what is private money and why does it matter? So when I say private money, I want to be very clear. I'm talking about capital from everyday individuals that is used to fund my deals, whether it's short-term or long-term. The reason why I want to make that distinction is because sometimes the term private money is used when it comes to an institution or a company that is lending. But what I'm going to talk about very specifically is from everyday individual people. So and very specifically, I'll say it is someone who doesn't have a business card that says I lend. Does that make sense? Okay. Now this may look like family and friends. This may look like a neighbor. This may look like someone else, right? But they're not going to have a banner in the back of the room with a table advertising saying I lend. So I want to make that clear distinction because a lot of people say, hey, Courtney, do you have one that you can refer? I said, let's talk about how that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about someone who's a business looking, hey, get referrals for it. They are an individual that you've built a relationship with that is going to lend to you on your deal. And so I just want to kind of build that clarity. So what I'm not talking about, again, those professional lenders, hard money lenders. And tonight I'm also not going to talk, because I'm going to be talking about how do you basically raise money for your deals. I'm not going to talk about commingling funds from multiple people, meaning let me take 5 of you and you fund my deal, or syndication for like a larger deal. I'm not going to talk about that tonight. All right. So what I'm going to speak about is one individual lending you money to fund the one deal. All right. Does that make sense? So why is it important to do this? So obviously I talked about like missed opportunities because the access to capital you may have is either limited, tied up. Some people say, Courtney, I use my own money. Why do I need to use other people's money? Well, that's very few of us. And the reality here is, again, opportunity cost. Your money may be tied up in these 2 projects, but what about if you had another project that came up, right? So those are some things that are important. One of the other things that I'm not talking about is, I'm not talking about how to find money from an individual for your primary residence. That is also a different topic that has to do with Dodd-Frank. There's some more, restrictions to that. So I want to kind of be clear what I am going to talk about, but what I'm not going to talk about. We clear with that? So ultimately, what we're going to talk about is what a lot of people call relationship money. And so when people say, hey, Courtney, I'm looking for referrals for private individuals, a lot of times I say, hey, because they're not someone with a business card saying, I lend, looking for clients, I say, hey, that's not, relationship money doesn't come from referrals like that. It may come from, someone introducing you and building a relationship with them that eventually they say, yeah, I'm interested in lending. But at the end of the day, it's ultimately going to come from building those relationships. I'm going to talk to you how to do that, how to find them, and how to build those relationships. I'm also going to talk about how to structure these deals. But ultimately, I want to encourage you to understand that this is not necessarily where you go find a list of these all in our area. That's just ultimately, it's not really about how do you go and find them. I find that more times than not, I create them. So not, well, that may sound weird, but the reality here is like, these are relationships I've built over time that they had all the ingredients, and it's like, hey, they have all the ingredients for a good private money lender, and then what I do is I help educate them, or I help point them in the right direction, and then what I do is I create a private money lender for myself. So the reason that this is important is, when we talk about is, a lot of people say, hey, Courtney, where's the list of all the private money lenders? Well, that's when I'm going to point you to all the professional lenders, right? Everything from the hard money lenders, various things like that, right? But when people say, I'm really looking for that private money from the everyday individuals, this is where I'm going to talk about how you can create them within your sphere. It does not have to be your family, because Lord knows that's complicated, right? It does not have to be people that you know immediately that they're currently lending money. It may be people who you, through conversations, they then basically get their money ready and they can start lending to you. So I want you to understand that there is a difference between there being like basically a Rolodex and you knowing how to see the opportunity and then going ahead and creating that. So the first thing I want to talk to you guys is, well, Courtney, you say these are everyday individuals. Well, what do they look like? How do I know if someone is a good fit? Because they're everyday individuals. They're not marketing themselves. They don't have a big card that says I lend. So I want to talk to you about what a good avatar of a private money lender is. And so then ultimately that avatar is, who is someone that is a good example of when I talked about those ingredients. And so, you okay?
I just swallowed whole, like the whole M&M.
Went down the wrong pipe.
The whole M&M just. I'm sorry.
No, you okay? You okay though?
I'm talking, but.
Yeah, drink some water. Can you try drinking some water?
Did it go down your airway?
The whole thing just, I don't know where it went down.
Try drinking some water, see if that helps. So let's talk through what a good avatar looks like, okay? And what I mean by that is, I want to start to paint the picture. When we talk about finding a good deal, we often talk about a motivated seller. And so we paint the picture, someone who might be facing foreclosure, someone who is, a tired landlord, retiring landlord, someone who inherited property. Does that not paint a picture for you of what to go look for? That's what I want to talk about as an avatar. Who is the people who have the right ingredients? And so some of the things that I've had is business owners, people who own businesses, right? They're busy running a business, and that could look like a lot of things. It could be a restaurant, or it could be something like they're a real estate agent, right? They're busy running a business, and they don't have time to do what we do, but they understand the value of it, right? And they maybe have some capital that they want to put to use. Next one we have is high-paid employees or people in sales. So you could also say like real estate agents for the sales part, but they could be, high-paid, salespeople could be medical. I have one that's a medical sales person. I have a few right now that what I like to call like they're on the deck, like they're getting warmed up. They haven't linked on a deal yet, but they're getting warmed up. I have some engineers. They make high income, but they work 80 hours a week, where they work 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. They don't have the time to figure out, but they're making, 6 figures, multiple 6 figures, and they understand there's value in real estate. They just don't want to go learn how to do the how, or they don't have the time. Another one is retired investors. This is one that they're going to know the how, they're just done doing it, to be frankly. Another one that I would say is, and this one can sound harsh, so I want to be careful saying it. I've also, I don't want to call them a failed investor, but they got into the business, they maybe did a deal or started looking to do deals, they're like, oh, that's too much work. And they're like, I'd rather just have someone else do the work and I, pick the money up. Does that make sense? And then the last one I have, which is my top performing avatar, is people who've had a steady job for a long time. And what I mean by a steady job is maybe they worked for Energy for a long time and they had a retirement account and Energy matched their 401k contribution. How many of you are like, when we say this, another one, maybe they worked for the school board. Maybe they worked for, one of the plants. Maybe they worked for fill in the blank for a period of time, and they had a retirement account that their employer contributed to. Most people that I'm going to talk about, these avatars, in your head, they don't have to be someone who's rolling in the dough, pulling up in a Rolls Royce, right? So when I talked about most people have 1 to 5 not ready to go, but good, they've got the ingredients within your phone. These are the types of people I'm talking about. They're not going to be people who you immediately think have, 100 grand in the bank. But how many people have 100 grand in their retirement account? How many, you would never think that. But when you think, well, if they worked for, Energy for 20 years, and Energy matched their employee contribution for their 401k, there's some potential time compounding for that, right? That's when you start thinking through that, man, I actually might know more people than I think, right? Because then it starts making a little bit more of the average Joe. You may know people who make 6 figures, but you probably know a lot more people who stayed at one job or they had a retirement account. Doesn't mean, let me also say this, the retirement account, they may not have stayed at one job the whole time. It could have just been that they've had a retirement account over multiple jobs. So the reason why this is really important is most people think private money lenders are, the people in mansions. The people who, again, they're going to pull up in a Rolls Royce. They're not. They're everyday people. Maybe they're just good at saving money. I've had one who inherited, let me say this, is widowed, and they have capital from real estate, but they also have capital, basically the money in the bank from their spouse when they passed away. And so they had this capital that they're like, hey, I need to go, make that money make money. But I'm not looking to be the who, right? To go figure out how to do it and all that. So I want to encourage you to understand they come in many different shapes and sizes. And you know more people than you realize. I tell people all the time, right now on your phone, there's someone that could fit that category. Or there's people that you come across all the time that could fit that category. So I like to often say that, and I know very little about horses and things like that, but a lot of people understand that real estate over time is one of the most secure investments. I mean, just look at like crypto and stock market the last few years has been, yo-yoing. And frankly, real estate can yo-yo at times, but historically it has a lot more of an upward trend, right? But the reality here, ultimately what it comes down to is people understand that real estate long-term is a good investment. Go ask people in your life, they're going to understand why it's good. But most of the people don't want to be the jockey that runs the real estate, right? They don't want to be the one on the horse doing the work. But they understand that the horse in the race matters. So ultimately, if we can sum tonight's entire talk up is, you are understanding and presenting the horse being the winning bet, real estate, the opportunities in real estate, and you're just saying, I'm a good jockey with this opportunity, and let me show you how I'm a good jockey. Does that make sense when you're looking at it like that? Because a lot of people are like, look, I don't have time to be the jockey, or, so they're busy, or I don't know how, or I'm done with that. Like, I want to be retired. So those things are really important. But ultimately, for someone to bet on the jockey, they want to make sure that they are competent. Like, that they're going to get the job done. They also want to make sure that they're trustworthy, right? Hey, if I'm going to put my money, my hard-earned life savings into your hands, they want to know that you're trustworthy, that you're going to, again, the competent part, that you're going to do what you say you're going to do and get it done. And the last one, that you're credible, right? Okay, so what happens if you're not trustworthy? Well, no one's going to lend you, right? We talked about that guy earlier, the WWL story. This business is very small. Many people think that we're in the business of houses. You've heard me say this before. I don't really think I'm in the business of houses. Many people think I'm the business of doing stuff with people, right? The business of working with people. Yes, it's true. More than that, I believe I'm in the business of making promises and keeping them. And so the minute that you stop making those promises, it's the minute that your business dies, right? And now some people come back from that, right? People have had bankruptcies, gone through foreclosures, they defaulted on things. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But I understand it's very difficult the minute that your promise is no longer good. So we're going to talk through that. So if you're not trustworthy, people are not going to want to lend to you. A huge part of being seen as trustworthy is people knowing who you are. If they know nothing about you, they're going to be like, oh, I'm sure it's a great opportunity, but no thank you. Because they don't know you as a jockey. They're going to say, I'm sure the horse is great, but find someone else, right? So a big part of that is you want people to understand, get to know you, to get to like you, and then to get to trust you. And a big part of that, this is why I share about the stuff that I do on social media. I am not great at it. If you go look how many times I've posted recently, I know every day it's on my to-do list, and I have been slacking lately. But the reality is go look pre-2020. I was not the best at posting on social media about real estate. You would have not known that I did real estate for the last 9+ years. But the reality is that when I started talking about it, I took myself out of being a silent professional, and I started sharing more. Now I'm not, being, crazy on social media, but I'm just talking about, hey, the crazy things you see. So like I was in Metairie on Sunday, and I took a video, and I meant to post it today, so maybe I'll post it at midnight tonight. But it's like a house where I was driving down the street, and I look, and literally it's like this person used 20 different colors on a roof. And I was like, is that a quilt on the roof with all the different shingle colors? And so I took a video of it. I'm talking about, like, man, I was in this neighborhood for an appointment today, and I saw this, and I'm like, man, first of all, my heart goes out. Because they probably did it on a budget, right? Because they were fixed income. The second part is, I'm like, my second thought was, I think their neighbors probably might not like them right now. Well, the third part is, did all the neighbors donate that? Right? Like, those are things I'm thinking, right? But the things we see when we walk houses, the house I walked the house on Sunday, and we walked it. What did we find in the middle of that one room?
Oh, a mouse trap with the mouse in it.
The mouse trap with the mouse still in it, but it had been a long time since that mouse first got out. And so sad, right? And what did I do? Do you remember? I took out my phone and I did what?
Oh, you took a picture of it. Yeah.
I actually took a video. Why? Because I plan on posting it. Again, I have to execute it a little bit better. But the reality is, the crazy things we see. The other thing I found was a gun in the closet. I was like, that was there. So, if the mouse would have just used that. No, I'm just kidding. The reality is, those are all things we're finding. We're out I like to say we're out there in these real estate streets doing things. You don't have to be flashy with what you talk about. You can just say, here's the real life. Man, look at these houses. There's a lot of, I can say, man, there's a lot of houses I walk that don't work out. That house, probably might not work out. And we say, but we see some crazy crap along the way, right? And people can start seeing you more and more doing the things that you're already doing. For example, you're here tonight. They can see that you're educating yourself to be a better investor or better involved in the community, things like that. And they can start to trust that you are trying to better yourself, that you're out there looking for deals, all of these things. If they're not seeing that, or if they don't know that you're doing that, they can be like, what's this person doing? Okay? The other part of that is, with that being trustworthy, them getting to know you, and a part of that sharing is they're getting to see your personality come out. So the other part of that is, are you competent? So a lot of times, Courtney, a lot of people listen, they say, Courtney, I'm a brand new investor, I've never done a deal. Do you think a private money lender will lend to me? And I say, a lot of times I'll say, this is the most difficult question to answer, is the level of your competency. Because you don't know what you don't know. So let's be frank here. A lot of times I say, maybe not. Maybe, if it's a family friend, someone who's known you for a long time, and they're going to invest in their belief in you. Like maybe you haven't done this one thing, but maybe you've done other things that they've seen, or they've seen your character over time, where they know that like you've been learning about this for so long, and they're going to do that. But otherwise, they may want to say, hey, they may want to know your track record, because at the end of the day, they're ultimately going to look and say, am I going to be safe? If I lend my money to this person, is it going to be safe? So they're looking at, again, the jockey. You can talk all day long about the horse being a good deal, right? Real estate it being a great opportunity, and people all day long will say that I understand that, but what I'm also looking at is the person who's handling the opportunity. So this is one of those things where I'll say, if you're brand new, and maybe you say, Courtney, that just makes me want to not listen to the rest of this class because I'm brand new. I want to encourage you a few things. Number one, work a tighter sphere. Work people who know your character. They know, hey, maybe you have worked at the same company for a long time, and they know your character. They know how you show up to things. They know how hard you work, and they're going to invest in you. But they understand the deal, but they're really investing in you. The other thing is partner with someone. Partner with someone who has the competency. Give up a piece of the deal, because if they're saying, hey, I have money and I want to lend on one of these deals, but I'm just nervous because you haven't done this yet, congratulations, you have 100% nothing if they're not willing to do that. But all the time I say, but if they said, hey, if you had a little bit of like someone who's experienced who would do this with you, I'd be interested. So if that person says, yeah, I would do it, but maybe come back to me after you've done a few deals, I would say, hey, so would you be interested in doing it if I had someone who is experienced? Would you be open? Just see what they say. And that's when you would go and find other jockey, and you would vet them out and say, hey, is this someone that I would want to partner on a deal with? And yeah, maybe use my private money lender, right? You bring the money lender to the table, but it allows you to start getting some notches on your belt, some deals under your belt, that you then feel that you can speak more to that. Are you competent? Can you actually get the deal done? What's your track record? Can you show them, hey, here's an example of a deal that I bought and I closed with someone else's money, and this is how it's performing, right? And so those are some things to look at. And then last thing is credibility. They may be looking at, maybe you haven't done a deal, but maybe you have some, like, the credibilities in some other fields. Maybe, you are a contractor. Maybe, you've have family member that have done it. Some things like that you can point to, whether it's your credibility or someone else's. Again, you can maybe see if that helps swing it. So for brand new investors, I'm going to point you to that, either tighter sphere, or you're going to do maybe partner with someone with that experience. Or lastly, go and look for those professional lenders. Because ultimately, I heard it said one time that the more attractive capital terms is going to come with experience, when you have that experience. Because at the end of the day, we all want these great terms, but a lot of that time is going to come when they feel more comfortable giving it. So then you'll have hard money lenders who are experienced at vetting deals and doing a little bit of vetting of the jockey as well, but they're just going to get a better return for the higher risk. Okay? And that's going to be more of a professional lender type of situation. So ultimately, the biggest questions you have to answer, your first question you have to answer to them is, are they going to be safe? And how are they going to be safe? The second question you have to answer is, basically, how are they going to make money? But most people spend all their time talking about how they're going to make money, and they never answer that big objection of how are they going to be safe. And that's where most people don't end up, pulling the trigger. It's because they say, I don't care if I'm making all the money in the world. If it's not safe, it's kind of that if it's too good to be true, or that snake oil talk. You know what I'm talking about? You want to be careful with that. So again, a big part of that is understanding the benefits of the deal and how someone will benefit from lending you money on it, and knowing how to communicate those benefits will help. So you say, Courtney, okay, maybe I have some of these people in my phone or in my life that I'm thinking of, or, maybe, I'm going to go to my next BNI meeting or local business chamber event, or I'm going to go to a family reunion or whatever, fill in the blank. And you say, Courtney, how do I actually start talking to people about this? How do I start having those conversations? So that's why I want to get a little bit practical with that. And I want to talk about some of your do's, and then we're also going to talk about some of your don'ts with it. The first one is, I talked about sharing your deals on social media. It can be you sharing, like, hey, I just closed this property today, right? Or it could be you walking properties, showing the activity leading to a closing. Maybe the renovation of one of your projects, maybe walking properties, going to meetings like this. Today I had lunch with some realtors. Little things like that. You can share about your activity in real estate. So then people can start relating these deals to you more and more in their mind. The second thing is, if you have some people who show interest in what you do, if you start talking about it, whether it's in person through social media, some people are going to start showing interest. And for those who are showing interest, I would encourage you is to open up those conversations and continue them. A lot of people say, man, I love watching what you do, Courtney. Like each time you share a photo or video, I just, man, that's so crazy. The mouse on the floor, ew, like I can't believe you walk those houses, or man, I live vicariously through you, or I watch HGTV every day, every night, and whatever. You guys know the types, right? I eventually invite people to coffee or lunch. Sometimes breakfast, sometimes dinner, like whatever. Fill in the blank. I say, hey, I'd love to talk to you more. Encourage people's interest in what you do. Does that make sense? And fester that, because you never know what that could look like. It could look like them, what you're doing is you're depositing into those relationships. You never know what it can turn into. Another thing is, so my significant other works for Shell, a bunch of engineers. Their base pay is often $100,000 plus. Some of them $200,000, $300,000. They are crazy smart, and they work crazy hours, or crazy schedules. A lot of those things, right? When I go to whether it's coffee school, Christmas party, whatever, one of the big things there is a lot of people say, hey, first of all, I get introduced, like, who am I with? Because I'm obviously not on the team. And they're like, hey, well, what do you do? Maybe you don't have to be in a room for engineers who make six figures. You could be at, this past weekend we went tubing up at the Bochito up in Bogalusa. And I got invited to go with one of my friends' group of friends. And a whole bunch of young professionals from New Orleans went, about 20 of them. And so I literally knew no one but two people. And so the rest of the people were new to me. So what was I doing all day as we're day drinking, floating? Is, first of all, I'm saying don't fall, let me hold your beer, but the second part of that is, hey, what do you do? Hey, where do you live at? Where are you from? All that stuff. And so what do you say when you say, what do you do? Maybe you have a W-9, like a W-2, and you have a 9 to 5. Maybe you say, hey, I do X, Y, Z. But how do you talk about your real estate? You say, hey, I'm a real estate investor. one of the big things I started doing was I started changing with how I talked about what I do. So one of the big things is say, he's like, you know what, so actually by, depending on the crowd, read the room. Let me also say that, read the room. There have been times I've been in rooms and it's not the best room to tell them I own properties because I would get stoned. So read the room. But a big part of that is say, so I buy properties that I partner with people on. And we either keep them as rentals or we flip them. And a lot of those people are everyday people that I partner with. So a lot of times I'll say that. There's been times where I talk about how, I put together, real estate deals where myself and other people benefit from them. You're like, what does that mean, right? Or I have rental properties that myself and a few other people own, or that, everyday people back me on, so that we can all benefit from the deal. Think through how you're talking about these deals. It may sound weird to you guys, but if you just say real estate investor, they're going to assume you have $1 million in your pocket and that you drive the Rolls Royce. I drive a Toyota. So the reality here, so that's a really big thing, is how are you talking about what you're doing? So here's a very common one is, or maybe you just say, hey, I'm a real estate investor. And maybe someone responds and say, oh man, I've always wanted to do that. Or I watch all the HGTV shows. And so I'm going to ask them some questions about it. But a lot of times they're going to say, I just don't have the time, or I don't know how to do that. I'll be like, well, interesting. So I come across deals frequently, and I'm always looking for people who want to partner on those deals. Would you ever be interested in talking about something like that? Again, the no time or they don't know how can be great ingredients for it, right? You see how I just opened up an opportunity? You took that excitement and that interest in what you do, and you turned it into a second conversation, like a invitation for that. So a lot of times I'd say is, well, hey, look, I'm always looking for people who are interested in what I do. I do partner with people on my deals each time. And so if you would ever be interested in getting a piece of the pie, I'd love to talk with you about that. You see how non-sales pitchy? I didn't have to straighten my button, my tie up and be like, well, let me show you this presentation of how, I give people returns on their money. Do you see how that is non-threatening and things like that? So if you hear people who have interest, but they don't have time, they don't know how, I really want to encourage you to plant seeds, to have more conversations. Well, you know what? So you've always wanted to do this. I know it sounds like you don't have time or you don't really know how. Well, if you ever want to go get lunch or coffee, I'd love to talk about it. And genuinely care to help them, right? Like if they want to do what you do, get out the way. Or maybe say, hey, maybe if you want to do a few deals together and then you graduate and do something, that's fine too, right? But ultimately, ultimately what I'm looking for is, I'm looking for people who have a problem that I can help solve as well. I've had private money lenders come from sellers of properties that I bought. Sellers that I bought properties from at a discount ended up lending money to me. One of my largest private money lenders, that's what the situation came from. Also, stop limiting yourself to think it's going to come from the guy in the long jacket, whatever it's called, in the Rolls Royce, right? Like they're going to look a certain way, right? There's a really good book on this that actually was my aha moment. One of my aha moments. It's a book called Getting the Money by Susan Lassiter-Lyons. Super short book. So if you follow me on social media, a few years back, whenever I read it, I ranted and raved about it. Super small book. I think it's less than 150 pages. It's called Getting the Money by Susan Lassiter-Lyons. And it's like how to raise $250,000 in 30 days or something like that. One of the biggest aha moments I had with that is to understand you are not begging people for money. That you are not, this person who's, I don't want to say, like, you're not second class, you're not lacking by asking people to lend on your deals. You have an opportunity that can help them get their money working for them. And so a big part of that is you have to change how you see. Because someone could be a great fit for you to lend on your deals, but you may feel like you're begging them to lend the money that they have, when you could be an answer to their prayers, truly. Like they have money sitting in a retirement account that's making, or the stock market could be making them very nervous. One of my lenders, the first time I talked to them, they had lost a significant amount in the stock market that day. My very first time ever talking to them on the phone. And I said, man, I'm so sorry to hear that. And they, I let them, vent, right? And then ultimately I say, like, so I understand you have some things in real estate. Are you some in the stock market, some in real estate, at least kind of offset that? And we got talking. And long story short, this was that seller with that deal, and it eventually ended with an opportunity for us to build that relationship further, right? And here's the thing: is some people may say, I want to diversify, right? Like I want to have some things in the stock market. Some people, I've had some private money lenders remove all of their money out of the stock market when it got really choppy, and they said, Courtney, I lost X amount. How can I earn it back with you? Where it feels safer, because compared to the stock market, like with the stock market, you're not really, let me say this, you're not getting collateral like real estate. So for example, yes, you're getting like an asset like a stock, but if that company goes kaput, you can't then just go get the house back in the same way if someone stops making a payment, right? And so the reality there is there's just very different benefits, because you can get insurance on it. So that house burns all the way down. Great, you know, if you got the proper insurance on it, you can do an insurance claim. Various different things like this. Ultimately, what you want to find is people that have that idle money. Let me say this, don't look for money when you need it. Like when you have a deal right now, that is the worst time to go looking for money, because you sound desperate, and desperate is often scary. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Very common problem. Also, don't disrespect people's investment. What I mean by that is, don't take it lightly if that's someone's retirement account, if that one's someone's life savings. So, let's go back to the competent talk. If you're not confident in that deal, don't put someone else's money at risk. One of the other things is, this is also a very common issue, is don't publicly promise a return. What do I mean by that? The SEC talks about this is like, for example, I see this a lot on social media, where people say, you know, they make posts basically publicly guaranteeing some returns. I have many attorneys who look down on that. So you're like, Courtney, well, you're saying use social media, you're saying don't do that. Well, when I'm talking about using social media, I might say how I do work with investors who, you know, maybe I'm at a closing and I've done photos. If you guys have been following me for a while, I've done photos where it's at the closing table and my private money lender got money back. So when I'm looking at that, a huge part of it is I can talk about that, but I'm not guaranteeing a return for a specific deal. Does that make sense? So the big issue I see a lot of people make the mistake of, you want to be careful, because there are rules to raising money and promising securities and guarantees. The other thing is, be careful taking money immediately. One of the rules I've always learned on this topic is to have a relationship for 45 days. So that's kind of your golden rule. Don't meet someone today and tomorrow take their money, especially if they're not a professional lender. So that's one of those golden rules that I've always used to abide by, where I'm like, hey, you know what? Maybe it won't work on this deal, but let's maybe keep in mind for some of the future deals. Hey, let's get to know each other. So I always look to do, when I get to know someone, I want to have at least 2 touches, as far as might be a phone call or a coffee, you know, something like that. And then I want to wait for 45 days to kind of pass, and then we do a deal together. So that's one of the other big things I've learned. Don't misrepresent facts. You know, don't say it's worth this much, but it's not. You know, you want to make sure that you're being clear on that. And then defaulting. You know, there are going to be times where things may go wrong, not as planned. The market changes. How many people have faced that in this last little bit? That's rhetorical. But a big part of that is, right, but it's the reality, right? I've had problems where the deal didn't shake out like it was supposed to. So I want to encourage, so don't default without a plan. How are you going to make it right? Don't stop talking to your lender. Go talk to them. So with all that being said, let me talk to you about how to structure it. So the first step is someone shows interest, right? So then you want to go ahead, you want to build a relationship, let that time happen, but maybe you already have that established relationship, so then you don't have to wait those 45 days, right? You want to show, so one of the things I do is I might show them some current deals. I might talk to them about some of the things I have in the pipeline that I'm working on. But ultimately, I want to get to know what their goals are. So what I mean by that is, talk to me about where your money is right now. Is it in the stock market? Is it stuck in your retirement account? Is it in the bank in a checking account? Is it in the mattress? Like, that's what I want to know, because that might point to, number one, how easy is it to access? Do they have to, sell their stocks to get it? Do they have to, or is it just a matter of, doing a wire from one bank account to the other? Does that make sense? The next one there is, I'm asking like, hey, what is your money currently get on as a return, and what are you trying to get? Right? If it's making 1% in the bank, and you offer them 12, they may say that's too good to be true. But 12 can be paid sometimes, right? 12% interest. So you want to say, hey, where's your money right now? What are you trying to accomplish? What would make you happy? What would make you interested in doing a deal? And it may be unrealistic, right? You want to kind of understand. Also, what are you trying to accomplish? And then also, what do you feel comfortable starting with? If we were to start doing some deals together, what would you feel comfortable starting with? And talk to me too, what type of timeline would you be interested in? I tell people all the time, there's benefits to doing it long term, and there's benefits to doing it short term. There's negatives to doing it long term, and there's negatives to doing it short term. So I talk through those, and I say, hey, what are you looking to do? I have gotten private money for both short term and long term. Long term is a lot more difficult. A lot more difficult. So you guys with rentals trying to get private money for long term, doable. I have 30-year private money loans with multiple private money lenders that I've done over the years. Not as easy, doable, but you have to understand what their personal goals are. And then here's one of the things is, so after that relationship has been established, bless you, we then start to send them deals. And basically what I do is I'll send them in writing basically a deal sheet. The address, some comps, some photos, the bed, bath, square footage, and basically my plan. Think of it as a business plan. I'm going to show them my proposal. What is my plan, and then what do I need? What am I looking for? So one of the big things I do there is I have to understand what the deal can support. I don't give the same rate on every deal, because not every deal can support that. So you do want to be careful with that. So I send them all that information, and I say, hey, is this something you want to chat more about? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send them a deal, and I'm going to say, hey, I'm looking for X amount of money, and that money is going to cover what? The purchase and the rehab, just the purchase, just the rehab. Like, what is it going to cover? And then how long do you need it for, and what are you offering? And we'll talk about how to structure that here in a second. But then the other thing here is I'm going to ask them, hey, talk to me if this is something you'd be interested in talking more about. Anything like that. Hey, let me know if you have anything available right now that you want to put to work. There's a handful that I'll go through that with. Because again, the worst time to try to get money from someone is, for the very first time talking to them about it is when you need it, right now, right? So these are people who've shown interest, and I say, hey, when I have an available opportunity, I'm going to send it to you, right? So these are the people who I have on that list. And then basically, if I have someone who's like, okay, yeah, Courtney, I'm interested, I have that money available, how available is it, right? Do you have to sell stocks first? Do you have to wait for this one deal to close in order to provide it? That's important. The other part of it is you have to agree on the terms. Let's talk about that here next. Both parties need to be on board with those terms, and especially with it being a win-win. And guys, it can be creative. I've done a lot of different deals, a lot of different ways. So again, there is some limits here, but also no limits to that degree. So I'm going to give you two common examples that I use. One of them is a debt example, and one of them is an equity. Another word for that is for debt is they're the bank, so it's, they're making interest. The second one is they're like a partner and they're making equity as well. So, for example, I've got a deal right now, and so I'm sending this out today. You'll see it over here. I don't want to go too big into this, especially because I'm going to be mindful of time. So I've got some land that I sold on bond for deed that I own free and clear. I still have the title. There's nothing hindering the title. And I want to recoup the cash that I have into it. So, and I've got a 15-year commitment from the buyer making payments. So I've got a pretty good a pretty good thing lined up. So what am I doing? I'm looking for that 30,000. And so what I'm offering is 8% interest only. So there's two ways you can do it. You can do it as simple interest or you can do it as compounding. So if you look here, I did 30,000 times point, so I didn't do that point very dark, 0.08, and that equals 2,400. So then I divide that by 12, and so it would be $200 a month is what I would pay them. That's based on simple interest. It's just the simple interest payment. Compounding is basically where it's stacking on top of each other. Each payment you're making, it's compounding upon that. Think about a snowball getting bigger over time. The compounding, if you look there, 30,000, they would get $14,695.40. When I divide that by the 5-year term, that's 60. That is going to get them $244.92 a month. So $45 difference from the other payment. So it adds up over time. So with that being said, what I'm doing here is showing you that there's two different ways to kind of figure out when someone's getting a debt position. And I'm going to give this person a first position mortgage on the property. And so here's something really important. You need to have the title to be able to give them a mortgage on the property. If you don't have that, that's important to recognize. So they're going to have a mortgage, if you're in Mississippi, a deed of trust. And so they're going to be protected because they're going to be in first position. If you have some other type of lien, mortgage, or something on the property, and they're not going to get first position, you need to disclose that because it puts them at more of a risky position. So they just don't have that superiority. So you need to acknowledge that. I have gotten private money loans in second position. I bought a property with creative financing, and I needed the money to rehab it. So I've used, maybe I use seller financing, maybe I use subject to the existing loan, and so there's already something in first position, but I got a second position loan. So maybe to either they've done more deals with me and they just feel comfortable, or maybe I just gave them a better rate, something to make up for the risk. The other thing is, how do I protect them? Is first position mortgage and a note. They get to keep that promissory note. And this is all drafted by the title company. Okay? Even after, right now I own the property, so we're not going and closing on it, because I already own it. But we would go to the title company, I would pay the expenses to put the mortgage on it and record it. So they're going to be protected by the title, right? So then the other part of that is, I'm going to give them a lender's title policy. So if there's any issues with the title, just like my title insurance policy, the owner's title policy will protect me, there's also a lender's title policy. The next thing I do, if I put insurance on that property, which you should, they're going to get named as additionally insured as the mortgagee. And so if something happened, just like as if Chase was on the title, like the lending on it, they would be involved in that claim to be made whole as well. Another thing that I do is, maybe they might want to see an appraisal, or you're going to want to get a home inspection, or especially if you're newer to this, doing things along those lines. The other thing is, maybe you self-insure normally and you don't get flood insurance. I would highly encourage you, especially if there's a risk, get them flood insurance and add them as additionally insured or the mortgagee. One of the big things there is they're going to get to keep that note, that promissory note. And whenever you pay it off, they would actually return it to you marked as, canceled, as, paid in full. So that's important. That's their role. The other part is the equity participation. So if they are getting more of that equity role, I do very few of these, but there have been some lenders who've lent to me, and I've actually said, hey, we've done all these deals together. Let me go ahead and do one with equity participation. And for example, I've given them anywhere from 25 to 40% of the profit of a deal to help them grow their money. I have an individual who came to me with $130,000 in their self-directed IRA, and over the deals that we've done together, it has grown to $155,000. How much money do you think I now have available to use on deals? $155,000. So there is some mutual benefit here to maybe giving up a little bit more piece of the pie to do a deal. Equity participation is different than a partner. They are going to be, they're not going to be, you know, the owner of the property. They're going to get a mortgage as well, same thing, but it's going to show that they have instead of getting interest, they're going to get a percentage of the profit. So if you're renting, they might get a percentage of, you know, the rent every month. Or if you sell it, they're getting a percentage of whatever the equity share is. So whenever you're structuring a deal, again, figure out what they're looking to do, figure out if they have any requirements, and lastly, you want to say, hey, are they looking to fund 100% of the deal? Do you need 100% of the deal? Maybe you structure a deal with creative financing where you don't need the purchase. You just need the rehab money. You need to figure that part out. Is it going to cover your purchase and your rehab? Is it going to come up short? What loan to value? Let me just say that real quick. Let's just say the house is worth fixed up $100,000. If you're getting it for 70 and it's going to require 30,000 in work, you're going to be 100% of your loans are going to be equal to the value. So what you want to do is you want to be careful to protect yourself and to protect your lender to not be, you know, basically over leveraged, even with private money. Do that to protect yourself and them. The next thing there is, again, protect them with first position. Figure out the length of the loan. One of the big things I'm doing to protect myself right now is I'm not doing short-term loans. Now, if I'm doing a flip, I might do 12 months, but right now I'd be very careful with that, just because short-term loans limit you. Let me go through a few other things. Do not do an unsecured deal, like where they don't get backed by a real estate deal. Where someone just says, hey, I'm going to give you all this money, go make money with it and get it back to me. Don't do that. Trust me, I've seen that go wrong more ways than not. Ultimately here, one of the big things I want to talk about is, you're like, Courtney, okay, I don't really know how to run those numbers. You can use things like bankrate.com. You can get with the title company and they can talk with you about the amortization schedule. One of the big tools that I use, it's the 10B2II calculator. So it's the number 10, a lowercase b, and 2 lowercase i's. I've used that calculator. It's like $5.99. I owned it for 6 months before I knew how to use it. It's a financial calculator, but like I use it so much these days, it is a huge tool that if I had to take it away, I would have to be forced to use another tool on the internet, but it's a pretty big one. Let me say another thing to be careful of. I know we're getting close on time here. You want to be careful of, is this their only money? Is this the money that they need to live on? Because they may not have the wherewithal to limit themselves to lend you just because they're excited with the returns. And what you don't want is for you to be this far into your project and they say, well, I need that money back, right? So you do want to be careful with that. Here's the other thing. I want to have clear expectations. You might lend on my deal, but I want you to understand you're not out there picking the color of the paint or the tenant that's coming in, right? So clear expectations of what that role looks like. If someone wants to be another chief, I'm going to say, well, do you want to start partnering on deals? And do I want to partner with you? Right? Like, so those are some things that are important. I want to encourage you to learn about self-directed IRAs and solo 401ks. These are retirement accounts. So a lot of people know of an IRA or 401k, these retirement accounts. But when it gets converted specifically to self-directed, oftentimes Edward Jones, you're like that's tech. What's Morgan Stanley, things like that. They're not going to have that opportunity to turn it self-directed, and so therefore they can't help you invest in these types of deals. They might be able to help you invest in a REIT or something like that. There are companies. Ones I've used is Advana IRA. So Advana IRA, and if you're looking for specific contacts at Advana, I have one. Her name's Larissa Green. I can get you in contact with her. Another company I've used is Quest Trust. My contact is no longer with them, so I don't have a direct contact for that one anymore. The reason why these self-directed accounts is, and really important, is number one, they have to go with a custodian. I just gave you the name of 2 custodians. The other thing is they have rules. So when I talk about creating private money lenders, it has been people who had a 401k with, Edward Jones, and they moved it to maybe Advana and made it self-directed. Now they can lend on my deals with me, right? So understand there might need to be some pieces there. I am not teaching you about that here tonight. I'm telling you, you need to go learn more. A lot of those companies that are custodians do a huge job of educating the public. So go check some of the videos that Quest has and Advana has, because there is a lot of rules when it comes. Who here has a self-directed IRA or 401k? Anyone want to say? I just opened my first one, right? And so I'm wanting to do more deals with them as well. So there is rules to what you can and cannot do. That custodian can tell you what that is. What you don't want to do is put your private money lender at jeopardy with their retirement account because you don't know the rules. The custodian should be your expert there. Lastly, so the compliance is a big deal. Here's the big benefit to that. If done right, it can be tax-free. So the one I just opened up has $25,000 into it. My goal is to grow it over the next, I don't know how long it will take me, to over $1 million, tax-free. So that's a big deal. That's another big deal to look into. Here's the other big thing, the financial friends concept. If I have limitations of what deals I can do, and one of them is called self-dealing, there's some levels where you can't, there's some issues with family, I forget all the rules. But the reality is, because I have limitations with that, how am I going to grow it? By doing deals with other people, right? Other jockeys on those horses. So in order for me to reach my goal of growing it is, I am going to then lend with financial friends, people who I've liked, know, and trust, and I feel they're competent to get the deal done. So I want to encourage you to understand that. There could be people in this room who have them that want to grow, and they're looking for other financial friends to where say, hey, look, we can meet our goals together. So in closing, reputation matters. Reputation matters. You need to respect their capital. They may have a whole lot of questions, and it may take them 2 years before they lend with you because they want to feel comfortable. That could be their life savings, their retirement. And look, there's a level that they're grown as adults, and they need to do their own due diligence on you and on the deal, right? But also be a good steward of it. If you fail, so if you respect their capital and if you perform, deals and money will flow. The minute you fail to perform, deals and money will stop flowing. That's a good principle to keep in this business. Don't be a silent professional anymore. Conversations, you want to start having conversations to build allies. So you're not selling, this presentation, and you're not begging 24/7, but say, oh, well, hey, man, next time you talk to someone who loves hearing your stories, I don't know about you guys, you go to a family cookout, and I have that one family member that loves hearing my stories. Man, I'd love to talk about you, talk with you about how there might be some opportunities. They may not have the capital, but they may know someone, or they may start, you could have them, convert their IRA or something and become one, right? So in your phone, I want to encourage you to go through the names. Who fits this avatar? Go back through the avatar we talked about. Who has the ingredients to potentially be a private money lender? And as you network, new networking, new relationships, how do you talk about what you do? I want to encourage you to think through that. I'm not saying read from a script and say, hi, my name's Courtney, and I make lucrative deals that profit and, they're safe and consistent returns for everyone. Did you get that? You want to see my card? No, you want to, hey, how can I talk about this in a way that is genuine, but they understand that, trustworthy, and we can talk more, right? Let me also say this, have a plan to raise capital before you need it. So maybe that is going into the local chamber of commerce, going to more BNI networking meetings, or starting to say your 30-second pitch of who you are, just changing that. And maybe that could be the next thing you can start doing. And then, who do you need to reconnect with? Maybe there's someone who's always shown interest in what you do. Maybe say, hey, let's go have coffee, let's go have lunch. So lastly, when I used to always say, hey, I'm looking for money, but I never put like specific effort into it. Understand if you want to raise money with private money and have access to it, it will take effort. You can't just go say, I'm going to find private money today. Like maybe you can manifest it, but like the reality is you also have to go do the work, right? You've got to start having conversations. You have to start seeing people with two eyes. One, just like naturally, but the other part is saying, hey, is there an opportunity for us to mutually benefit each other here, right? So with that being said, know how to pitch the benefits, and then ultimately here is find people who have money that's sitting idle, who have a problem, they need it to make a better return, and ultimately find a way to help solve that problem for them. So any questions? I know I'm going over. Any questions? Yes, sir.
You might have answered it, but I think I might have missed it. If I was to take second position on your deal and something happens to you, is there an instrument that will require the mortgage company to honor our deal?
So with you being in second position, if something happens to me, I get hit by a bus.
Yes.
So the questions here is, basically, am I going to stop making payments, right? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on my estate planning, right? The second question here is the big question is if you stop making payments. Well, then you, second position, when it's secured by real estate, you then are still entitled.
So the mortgage
Right.
company was.
Well, like you're clouding the title. No, not the mortgage company. Here's the reality is you are in fact a lender, right?
Right.
And if I stopped paying you, in the mortgage that you have in the promissory note, it outlines what happens when I default. Basically, there's a process for you to go after, like basically going after the property. But when you're in second position, you then also have to pay off that first mortgage.
All right,
See what I'm
so
saying?
I'll be like a lien holder or something?
You will absolutely be a lien holder. But so the reality is your paperwork should be drafted by an attorney.
Right.
John Stevens with the REIA title, he's done a lot of them for me, both the equity participation one and just the debt one. And the big part of that is you want to know what happens if they default, right? And there's another part of like betting on a good jockey is are they like what's going to happen if something happens to them? Does this person have their paperwork together? Right? All right, you can either get this with a Grant Cardone hat, 10x cash flow, or that is not an endorsement. Or I have one of 3 books. Which one do you have? Which one would you like?
Oh, for me?
Yeah.
Pick a top one. The top one's a good one.
So we have Millionaire Next Door, Spin Selling, or the Warren Buffett way.
I like Warren Buffett, but I'm gonna do the millionaire one.
There you go.
All right.
All right. Any other questions?
If I answer twice, can I get a book?
That didn't take long to figure that part out.
What's your main goal or objective when you have a sit down with that person for the first time? Like, what are you wanting to accomplish?
So his question is, when I have a sit down like that coffee or that lunch, what's my main goal? My main goal is saying, hey, what are you trying to accomplish, and can I help? Zig Ziglar said it best, if you help enough people get what they want, you'd have everything you want in life. And so, because here's the thing, if they're wanting 90%, equity in a deal, I may not be the best fit for them, but maybe I might on a certain deal, right? So I'm trying to figure out what they're trying to accomplish, and can I fit into that?
Are you doing anything to disarm them? Some people like, hey, they're
Spending time with them. I've gone on walks with people, coffee. I actually, I have one. It's relationship building rapport. Don't talk. Don't sit down and say, "Let me pull out the slideshow." Here is, like that's like, I would be armed at that point. But like, you want to just build a relationship with them. Hey, how's it going? Right? Why do they want to build their retirement account? Right? It's generally because they want the freedom of time, the freedom of location, the financial freedom. What would you do so my 401k, for example, you and I sat down and I just said, man, my goal is I've got 25,000 a year, I'm gonna grow to over $1 million. What are you gonna do when it's over $1 million, man? That's awesome. I'd love to see you get there. Love to be a part of it too. What would you do when that happens? What are you gonna use that for? right? By helping people get what they want, it's a huge part of you getting what you want. You happy, man? You want a book? We're 2 for 2.
Oh, take both of them.
No. That's 2 for 2 and that. Yes, ma'am.
How can you reinforce your competency with, a potential person that you're getting money from if you don't know them?
So that's going to be spending more time with them. You can also have some, basically a credibility packet where you can show past deals that you've done in your performance. And again, it goes back to the conversation, if you haven't done them, it is either they know you use a professional lender who's going to have basically stipulations for that, or it's someone who, you partner with someone who's credible. And then you're pitching the credibility of the experienced person you have with you. It's like the shared credibility. Book or hat? I almost did that. See how it does it?
How do you handle, say you have someone who wants to invest with you, but they've got a small amount, 10 grand, 15 grand. Are you using that maybe for option consideration, or do you have another way you can utilize people who don't have enough to fund an entire deal?
What do you do when someone only has a small amount? Not that easy to do deals with small amounts. Very easy if you're a creative real estate investor. But they're gonna maybe be put into second position on the deal. We're doing a land deal, right? Like 30,000 is small. This property, I have a bond for deed for 60,000. Literally executed for the next 15 years. And this guy's making payments of $550 a month, principal and interest. And I'm looking at a $200 a month interest-only payment. And I have no other expenses with it, because they're paying the taxes and the insurance. And it's a 50% loan to value. Is that a pretty safe deal for them? 30,000, that's not a lot of, money, but creative deals, subject to deals, where I have to catch up a loan or pay the closing costs or do some repairs. And so then they're in second position. So maybe I might also give them maybe a bonus for being in second position. Maybe 1% of the sales price or something. Or, maybe give them a little bit of equity participation instead. I have 25,000. I've got to put that to work. The way I plan to use it is partnering with people in their creative deals for a percentage of equity for growth. So, great question. Anyone else?
The Dodd-Frank
Yeah.
you were talking about. Can you explain that more on the creative side? Is that for raps or?
So, I'm going to hold off on talking about that too much here because Dodd-Frank is when it's owner-occupied. So, one of the things I said is this is not going to apply to owner-occupied loans because Dodd-Frank, there's a lot of compliance you have to put into that. If you come to Chimes, we're going to go to Chimes here in a second. If you can stay around and hang out there, I'm happy to talk a little bit further into that. That is literally compliance when you're dealing with either seller financing or lending for someone who is going to be an owner-occupied. And there's going to be some federal legal compliance things there. That's for Dodd-Frank. Yes, sir.
Do you recommend this over the 203K renovation type loan? You think it's an easier, quicker way to?
So I've never used, so yes, if this is easier than a 203K loan, I've never used a 203K loan. Has anyone done both private money and 203K loan that they can speak to? 203K, yes.
They got to charge you 2 points no matter what. So
My-
that would be the same thing as private money.
So here is my personal belief is that my preference is to deal with an individual rather than an institution. At the end of the day, if you've ever called into a bank and talked with the bank, it is a very black and white, what's on the, there's not a lot of flexibility. Dealing with an individual breeds some flexibility in the relationships there. So one time I had a deal that it was a short-term loan at 6 months. It did not go right. The property did not sell in that amount of time. So I had a 6 month length of it. At 6 months, it was not selling. I went to my private money lender and I said, I can either go find another private money lender, or I've got all these closings coming up and I can make you whole. Which one do you prefer? And she picked, all right, make me whole in the next few weeks with the closings coming up. And sometimes you can go to a bank and maybe have some, compromises you make. But at the end of the day, my personal opinion is I prefer an individual over an institution all day long. Also, what you have to present paperwork-wise for a 203K loan, you do not do that for private money. You need to dot your I's and cross your T's as far as having a mortgage and a note, and the numbers need to make sense, and you need to show them how it makes sense, but they're not making you like jump through hoops like a normal institution would. Anyone else? Was this helpful for you guys? There was a lot more to go over. All right. Well, look, guys, at 2 minutes ago, we were supposed to be heading to Chimes. If you guys want to come to Chimes, what we do is the meeting after the meeting. We're going to go there, grab some food, grab some drinks. If you want to come talk further, I'm heading there and I'll talk further with you. Thank you guys for coming to joining us. If you've got any questions, reach out to me, and I'm happy to help. Thanks you guys so much for attending. Thank you. One time I had it fall over in the middle of it, and I was